So, I just got out of seeing the brand new horror movie Immaculate 2, aka The First Omen. And yes, if you've seen the Sydney Sweeney horror movie Immaculate, this is essentially the same exact thing as a big movie about a nun kind of getting pregnant with like a weird antichrist thing. Essentially the same thing. Except 20 times better. This movie is a lot better than Immaculate. It's also a prequel to a better movie, a movie called The Omen, which came out in the 70s. A movie that I didn't think I had seen, and then I went back before seeing this and tried to get a refresher. I watched The Omen, and I realized, oh my god, I have seen this movie. I know everything that happens in it, and it's pretty solid. If you don't know, The Omen is about this kid who is essentially the Antichrist. This movie is about how he was born, pretty much. And I thought it was pretty good. I have my issues with it. There are certain things about this movie that I'm going to nitpick, and it's going to lower the score a little bit. But overall, I had a really solid time with this movie, and I'm going to explain to you why. First off, things I like about this film. First off, the visual style is definitely really strong here. There is actual good cinematography here. They do not kind of ignore the cinematography in this film like a lot of horror movies do. A lot of horror movies just kind of that same sort of factory-built AI visual style. They all kind of just phase into each other, that same James Wan-y style that they're all kind of copying. This movie does not. This movie is very unique. It's got sort of that A24-esque vibe to it, and it looks great. There are some incredible shots here, and it pairs well with the direction that I also thought was great. There's some really good direction here, really interesting choices with what they did with the cameras, what they did with the edit in some scenes, and how they kept the camera rolling and didn't cut too much. Really good decisions. This movie, from a technical aspect, both in how it was shot and the direction, is really, really well made. When I do get to my complaints in this film, it will mostly be with the script, and I just have some nitpicks about it. But when it comes to a technical aspect, this is one of the best made horror films of the year, and it probably of the decade so far, to be honest. Because most horror movies we get, it's really kind of become like the MCU of that genre. Every movie's almost the same thing. They follow the same sort of plot structure. The scares pretty much come at you the same way. There aren't many people making unique horror films. We recently got a very unique one, Late Night with the Devil. You got guys like Ari Aster, Robert Eggers really making some different stuff. And the main thing I'll praise about this movie is that this movie definitely tried being very different than the standard horror movies we get, with the way it scares the audience, with the way it's shot, and from that point, go see it. It's amazing because it does all of that stuff perfectly. I also believe this was either a directorial debut or one of the first movies from the director, Arkasha Stevenson. I've never seen anything else she's done. This is one of her first big movies. Great job. She is a fantastic director from what I've seen here. The cast here is also incredible. This is like a cast that I would dream of. This is an amazing cast, and I'm going to tell you why. The opening scene, you get Ralph Ineson, a guy who should be in way more stuff. The guy is just incredible, and his voice alone literally brings so much power to any character in any movie, and the opening scene of this movie is him and Charles fucking Dance. Let's get a whole movie of that. Somebody, please. There wasn't enough Charles Dance in this movie. You know, I was expecting him to be like a main kind of front character in this film, and he's not, unfortunately. It's really just a cameo, but those two guys together, those two actors, and their voices, and like just the presence they bring to the screen, we need a whole movie of that. But the star of this movie, Nell Tiger-Free, she really carries this film. She does an excellent job. I've never really seen her in anything else, at least major, but she is a great starring actress, at least in this film that I've seen her in. She plays this nun who goes to this place, and she kind of gets swept up in this conspiracy and all this stuff that's going on. She is able to sell both this kind of conflicted person entering this church where bad things are happening, somebody that really wants to be good and do the right thing with her beliefs, with her love of God. She's got this innocence to her, but she's also got this vulnerability to her, that she actually does things that maybe somebody in her position shouldn't be doing, and she sort of is experimenting with her life, and she sells that really, really well. And then deeper in the movie, she gets to do some weird stuff. There's one scene in particular, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it here, but it's a one-shot. It's a very long take of her doing one thing, and I'm split. 50% of me is like, that is one of the best performed scenes of the year. It's incredible, and she is incredibly talented. And another part of me goes, that was a little corny. And maybe I gotta see it again to know for sure, but either way, she carries this film. You can tell from the trailers, she just looks like a star here, and she is so good in this movie. Now, how are the scares? Any horror movie needs to be able to scare you. Well, this movie, I will say, it's my type of horror movie. This is what I like when it comes to scaring people. Did this movie scare the living shit out of me? No, because it's not really meant to be that. Are there a lot of jump scares? Honestly, I don't even think there's any jump scares in this movie. It's not a jump scare fest, which I love. Because the way horror movies are usually structured this day is you get a lot of exposition, and then you get like 5 minutes of a scare sequence, which is usually just set up, jump scare, set up, jump scare, and then back to exposition. And then sometimes they'll throw some unique stuff in there. This movie does not have that structure. This movie is just plot. some interesting visual stuff, some great sound design, and hopefully along the way, in the thriller and the suspense, it'll scare the audience. That's what this movie's going for, and I think, for the most part, it does hit it. I think a lot of people are going to be terrified here. I think there's a lot of scenes that are made for shock value, that do some body horror, that show you some grotesque things that may stick with audiences, and I think it does a really good job at that, of really giving you a holy fuck moment. In the same way, and I'll say this is a movie that I feel like was trying to go for that Ari Aster vibe, and I have yet to see a filmmaker try to at least mimic his style. Everybody's mimicking the James Wan style horror movies, and they've just done it so much that it's watered down that style of movie. Now, I've seen a movie where I feel like they're trying to replicate an Ari Aster style, where it's really more about the shock value, the imagery, the visuals, the music, the sound, more so than the boo, you know, like the fucking jump scares and the setups of them. Does this movie do it as well as something like Hereditary and Midsommar? For me, no. Other people might find it to be, you know, work as well as that, but it definitely tries, and it has some interesting things to show and to say at times. Now, what about the plot? What about the writing? Here's my only issue with the movie. First off, I think the opening is a little slow, and I always say, I've said it every time I've reviewed a horror movie on this channel, is that the biggest thing a horror movie needs to do in this genre is it needs to hook an audience within the first 5 minutes. That's why almost every horror movie has some sort of unique, energetic, or terrifying opening, because it needs to hook you in both its world, its tone, and its concept in the first 5 minutes. If it does it, it's got you the whole runtime. If it doesn't do it, then you're just kind of left bored for a lot of the runtime. And I will say the opening of this movie, it took a while. It took a while to grip me. It moved a little slow, and it felt way too similar to the new Sydney Sweeney movie, Immaculate, which, like I said, is nowhere near as good as this, but that opening felt so similar at first that I just felt like I was watching the same movie for like the first 20 minutes, and because of that, it took a while to get me into it. I do think this movie's maybe a little bit too long as well. It feels like there are 3 different times in this film it feels like you're entering the third act. It feels like you're getting to the big crescendo moment of the film, but then it resets and kind of gets back into the second act, and then builds up, and then resets, and then builds up again, and I'm not really sure the film needed that many big beats in the story, in the plot. You maybe could have taken out 1 or 2 of them and got into the third act faster. And I know I complain a lot on this channel about movies being too long, and I know a lot of people will tell me, long movies are great, you're just stupid and can't sit there for a long time. I just think some movies need to be long, and some movies you could just sit there and say, this could have been like 20 minutes shorter. This is one that probably could have been a little bit shorter. I also think at times the plot could be a little too predictable, specifically in the sense that if you know what happens in the next movie, the original movie, obviously this is predictable, you know where it's going to end up, but there is such little stakes attached to the idea of trying to prevent this birth, because you know it's going to happen, that it just makes everything else in the movie just feel irrelevant, because you know it's coming. Even the movie sells the idea, if you've never seen the original, they tell you, no, we're not trying to birth the Antichrist, we're trying to birth the mother of the Antichrist. So immediately you're like, oh, so there's a more important story out there that I'm supposed to also watch after this. And it's like, yeah, there is. It's called The Omen. Go watch it. And because of that, it kind of waters down, like, the purpose of this plot. It almost makes me feel like I wish this was almost a reboot instead of a prequel, and they just kind of did its own thing. I almost wish this movie wasn't even called The First Omen. It was just something new, because it had to attach itself to a movie that not a lot of people have seen that came out almost 50 years ago, and because of that, it was watered down a little bit, and it took away a little bit from the plot that could have been more unpredictable and more exciting. The movie also sets up a sequel that, dare I say, I kind of want to see. I sort of want to see this weird, without spoiling anything, another big movie about, like, the conspiracies of the church, the politics of the church, facing off against what happens at the end of this movie. I think that would be really cool. And it's something that can even go beyond the original movies and its sequels. Those movies can exist and be their own thing, and we can also kind of continue the story of this, and we can make a sequel to this, connected to the originals, but it can also just be kind of its own diverting line from the originals and be its own movie series, and that I think is cool. It sets up an interesting story with characters that I like. So I would be very, very intrigued at the idea of what they could do next with this. Something I don't say a lot with horror movies, but this is one of them. I would like to see a continuation of this story, if I'm going to be honest. Overall, this is a movie that really surprised me. I remember when the first trailer came out, it was a really unique trailer, and I thought, that looks really excellent. And then the second trailer came out, and it was less of a unique trailer. It was more of a standard horror film trailer, and I thought, oh, that's going to be another generic horror film. And going into this movie and sitting down in the theater, I thought the entire time, oh, I really don't want to see this. It's going to be another generic horror movie. And I was pleasantly surprised that it was indeed not a generic horror movie. It was something different and something innovative. It's a movie that highlights the strengths of all the filmmakers and all of the actors involved in it. It highlights all of their strengths, doesn't really expose any of the weaknesses. It has really interesting direction, really great choices, and it's a movie that, at me, as somebody who's kind of sick of this genre and looking for something new, and got something new a week ago with Late Night with the Devil, I am happy to say that we also got this movie, which is also a unique taste in this genre. Is this a movie that I'm going to be remembering a year from now? Probably not. But it's a movie that I will give a 3.5 out of 5. I could recommend the first Omen and say it is a solid horror movie. Go check it out. That's the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, turn on notifications for more. I will see you guys in the next one.